Before setting out on revenge, you first dig 2 graves.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars and welcome to another of my classic James Bond reviews. Today I'm taking a look at the 1981 Bond film, For Your Eyes Only. The film is directed by John Glenn and we of course have Roger Moore as James Bond, we have Carol Bouquet, Topol, we have Lynn Holly Johnson, Julian Glover, Cassandra Harris and Michael Gothard. This time round, Bond is sent to investigate a missing British vessel that it's got something like a weapon encryption device on it that it kind of sunk down with it. Very important. If it gets into enemy hands, then basically all our defences in this country will be left open to the world's terrorists. So Bond has to investigate. He basically heads out there, does what James Bond does, gets into lots of escapades, kicks a lot of ass, lots of stunts, lots of skiing, lots of underwater scenes, and Bond is Bond. Right, what are my thoughts on For Your Eyes Only? Well, this is actually, I believe I'm right in saying, Roger Moore's second favourite Bond film that he did. His favourite was Spy Who Loved Me. And this has always been his second favourite. And after the huge success of Moonraker, which was a massive financial success, but it had a massive budget as well also at the same time, and it was criticised by a lot of critics, saying it was too outlandish and getting a bit too unbelievable now, James Bond. So they wanted to kind of strip it back to its basics, the Bond series. And so that's exactly what they did with For Your Eyes Only, and it's a much more traditional Bond adventure, I suppose it's fair to say. Now, growing up, these final 3 Roger Moore films, other than obviously them having their moments, I never really was big fans of them. So I was quite interested and intrigued to kind of revisit them, because I always felt like it went downhill after Moonraker with Roger Moore's films. And while I don't think this is as good as Moonraker, or certainly Spy Who Loved Me, which is obviously, certainly in my opinion, and probably most of yours, Spy Who Loved Me is the best Roger Moore James Bond film. This one actually quietly impressed me with looking at it, you know, from a different perspective. Like, as I've said a few times doing these James Bond reviews, I've never watched them in sequence, and some of them I've not really watched them. The kind of Bond films in this country, in the UK, and probably many other countries, but certainly in the UK, from my generation anyway, you kind of grew up watching Bond films on, you know, Christmas Day and Boxing Day and bank holidays and, you know, school holidays. You know, they'd be on all the time, the Bond films, and they were on and you never really watched them. You just kind of glanced at them, and if there was an action scene you'd watch it, and then talky bits happened, so you focused on doing this over there sort of thing. So this one kind of never really struck me as, you know, I don't know, I think when, as a kid, when you watch something like Moonraker and you go to a For Your Eyes Only, it feels like a downgrade. But in actual fact, it was a very, very smart move. There are some very, very strong moments in this Bond film. It's actually pretty non-stop action for the most part, this one. A lot of it feels a bit disjointed because it goes from like literal, you know, like downhill skiing action scenes. You've got car chases, then you've got underwater scenes, and I mean, you know, skiing down bobsleighs, rock climbing. I mean, you name it, it's got it all, this one. They kind of throw everything at it, but in a less outlandish way, you know what I mean? I think some of the weakest parts of this film, it's got a terrible villain in regards to Julian Glover. Completely unforgettable villain. And the 2 potential villains that could have worked in this film, I think if they'd have put a bit more effort into them, was Michael Goddard's LeCroux, was he called? The guy that puts like the dove things in and was involved in probably, in my opinion, one of the best James Bond scenes that I think's ever been put to film, where he, you know, his car's hanging over the ledge and Bond just boots it off the ledge. I know Roger Moore never liked that scene. I just thought it was really badass. It was proper James Bond stuff, that, and again highlighted just how cold he could be, and he was just an assassin, and he just, you know, if you've crossed him or you've done some of the things that this guy has done, Bond's ending you. I love that scene. It's fabulous. I really do. And it emphasises just who James Bond is as well. But they didn't give that villain, even though he's in one of the best scenes, in my opinion, in the Roger Moore James Bond films. He's not a particularly memorable villain. I don't think he actually speaks, does he? And the other guy, you've got like this German pistol guy that's chasing Bond down the, you know, the skiing scenes and stuff down the Alps or whatever it is. And then he's chucking bikes at him, and, you know, he's clearly well built and stuff, and they just don't do enough with him. He could have been a really formidable opponent for Bond if they'd have structured his character better. But he's got not given anywhere near enough to do in the film. So there's no memorable villains here. Now, obviously, he's got Carol Bouquet as the Bond girl. Very beautiful and very memorable as a Bond girl as well, in my opinion. She was dubbed in the film because she couldn't speak English particularly well, even though she did the French dub, obviously. And then you had Cassandra Harris as well as another Bond girl in a scene that was very reminiscent of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the opening scene there on the beach. But beyond that, I wouldn't class them as like the strongest Bond villains that, you know, I've seen in a James Bond film as well. And I think some of the key elements that you need in James Bond are a strong villain, strong Bond girls, a strong title song, which they have here with Sheena Easton's For Your Eyes Only. Great Bond song, I think definitely up there with the best. So you need certain things here to kind of really elevate yourself to be like being a really, really strong Bond film, in my opinion. And it does lack a couple, certainly in regards to memorable villains anyway. But the action and the stunt work here is outstanding. It really is very, very good stuff. The whole scene at the beginning as well, I really like. I like the way they reflect on his past when he's putting flowers on his wife's grave. I thought that was a really classy thing to do. And then they kind of ruin it a bit with the whole Blofeld opening sequence, even though they can't call him Blofeld at this point, Blofeld at this point for legal reasons, but it's clearly him. That whole opening sequence is a bit silly, even though I did enjoy seeing him tip him down a big massive chimney. And even though my understanding is that Roger Moore didn't like the whole Margaret Thatcher scene at the end, I thought that was fabulous. I really did. And where she's thinks she's talking to Bond and she's talking to the parrot, and does the parrot say to her, "Give us a kiss"? I just thought that was so funny. It was really hilarious. M is sadly missed here. This was the first Bond film where we didn't get M. They explained it on screen by saying he was on leave, but in actual fact he wasn't able to film because he was very, very poorly. I think he had stomach cancer and he died, I think, shortly after filming commenced. So they didn't want to recast the role at this point. So they just they got like the minister in to kind of cover for M, and Q got some extended scenes that M would have done, Bernard Lee. So he was definitely, in my opinion, missed because he'd been a staple to the Bond films up to this point. So I do think this is a good, very watchable and entertaining James Bond film. I enjoyed it far more than I probably did when I was younger. I can appreciate and respect it more than I did when I was younger. And I think this is probably getting to the end of peak Roger Moore. I know there are quite a few fans out there of Octopussy. Again, that's not one that I've ever been a fan of, really, but I'm looking forward to rechecking it out and looking at the story behind Octopus Head, because at that point they were going to cast again James Bond. Roger Moore had enough of the part by that point. But there was a little Bond production on the horizon called Never Say Never Again that changed all that, but we shall talk about that on the next review. So thanks for joining me, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this James Bond film in the comment section below, and I'll see you on the next review.